So we're joined this morning by Nathaniel Castro. Nathaniel, you and I have been talking about Bitcoin for the last couple of months, but you actually have an interesting project that kind of goes beyond Bitcoin.
Yeah, so I guess how I wound up finding Bitcoin initially is sort of a long story, and it involves something that's not exactly Bitcoin related, but actually has some parallels. Several years back, I sort of went down the rabbit hole of, how the world works, how things work, how money works, how economy works, and came to some conclusions regarding fiat currencies and peak oil issues and these kinds of things, and that was that we are totally screwed. Going down the fuel avenue of oil and an oil economy and these things, I realized that energy is wealth, and the ability to control energy is wealth. And in third world countries where they can't have lights, that's poverty. I got really depressed, coming against the oil shortages, commodity shortages, and a currency that literally can't hold water. And so I just started poking around, trying to figure some things out, trying to decide what to do. I got started researching local currencies a lot, and local currency schemes, and Ithaca hours and this kind of stuff. And then I came across a guy who wrote a book called Alcohol Can Be a Gas, and his name's David Bloom. And I'd heard some interviews with him basically when I had come across the biofuels avenue of and when I talk about it,
let's back up a second here. Let's back up a second here. I'm not sure that everybody really appreciates, because peak oil is a term that gets thrown around, but I think there are a few different definitions of it. Peak oil is not to say that, no, correct me if I'm wrong here, peak oil is not to say that we're out.
Absolutely not.
It's just that we've hit the peak of production, and yet based on global growth,
exactly,
that doesn't work. The math doesn't work anymore in the same way that it
becomes
used to.
harder to get and more expensive and more scarce.
So do you think that we're at that point? We're approaching that point? We're past that point?
I don't know. There are arguments both ways. To be honest, I don't really care.
Right, it doesn't matter.
And quite frankly, I don't even care so much about the peak oil issue. I just don't like putting gas in my car. I don't like extracting something from the ground that spits carbon monoxide into the air. I would rather put something that's carbon neutral and semi-locally produced.
Right.
At least domestically.
Sure. Okay.
In my car. I don't like being forced to do anything. And so, I want to use ethanol and I want to use Bitcoin.
So to a certain extent, it sounds like it sounds like you agree with the government, who also likes ethanol and likes to incentivize ethanol.
Yeah. For very yes and no. Our current ethanol infrastructure is larger scale industrial. It's not necessarily what David Bloom or this book or I would necessarily advocate, which is more appropriate scale.
Okay. Well, I interrupted you, so let's get back to that. Can you tell me about what he's advocating?
He's advocating an appropriate scale. The history of ethanol and alcohol in this country is fascinating. And, to anyone, I would encourage them to get the book, or at least dig up some David Bloom, lectures and understand a little bit about the history of alcohol in this country. The first car, the Model T, ran on ethanol as well as gasoline. And you could fill it up with gas in the city and then go out to the country and fill it up with ethanol, which is alcohol, which is basically moonshine. Any farm in the country had a still. And it wasn't until Prohibition that changed and it became illegal. But in my opinion, it should be something that everyone understands, that you can produce fuel. You can run moonshine in your car right now, And that was something I didn't understand. And when I went down this road and I sort of came across ethanol, I saw, the headlines that everyone sees, that it's energy negative, that it takes more petrol to make, ethanol than you get energy out of it.
So is that not true, broadly speaking?
That's not true.
No.
That's not true. It's largely based off of one guy's study, this guy David Pimentel, who was actually funded by, I think, Exxon.
So a little bit of a conflict.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a conflict, and it's also his numbers are based off of things like 1940s whiskey distilleries, which aren't, when it comes to the ethanol production, efficiency is extremely important, and so, I mean, when you take Brazil largely produces most of their fuel from sugarcane ethanol, and so there's that whole side of it is a whole long conversation, and I would really defer most of that to David Bloom and his book, because he's the professional, I'm just the student, but it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating, and it falls in line, I think, with some of the ideologies of cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. That is, you guys had your chance, we're going to do it our way, and we're going to do it a different way, and we can do it ourselves.
So one of the other differences and also similarities, it seems like, is that where if you have a limited resource that is only geographically in some parts of the world and is certainly more accessible in some parts of the world where it is there than others, that's contrary to, say, something that is produced from a crop, from a grown thing. And moonshine, moonshine is not even really fuel specific. You can make it out of sugarcane. You can also make it out of potatoes.
You can make it out of a ton of different feedstocks.
Okay, so to a certain extent, an alcohol-based fuel system is a more decentralized system.
Absolutely. One aspect of it that I think is interesting from a theoretical perspective. I'm sure there are plenty of arguments that can be made for this and that and whatnot, but from a theoretical perspective, like I said, energy is wealth. And what alcohol is liquid solar energy. It is basically sunshine comes down, combines with carbon dioxide in the photosynthesis process, and creates carbohydrates. The yeast eat the carbohydrates, convert it to alcohol and carbon dioxide, and what you have left is alcohol. So when you distill out the alcohol, what you have left in your mash is everything that was already there. The proteins, the fats, the nutrients, the minerals. The only thing you're extracting is the alcohol, which is liquid sunshine. So now if energy is wealth and alcohol is liquid sunshine, we're being rained wealth on us every day. And it's just a matter of harvesting it. And that's what farmers do. That's what you're doing when you're using the photosynthesis process to collect that energy.
So now I've also heard this argument made about solar, but it seems like this is a little bit different than solar in a couple of ways.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably talking about the photovoltaic sort of aspect of solar, which
I am, yes. Yeah, I mean, like the electric generation.
Yeah, that has all sorts of problems.
Okay, but this is, I mean, one of the main problems it has is that the places where you generate solar energy from photovoltaics generally isn't where you need to use it, and there's a loss over transmission. And that's not really the case with a liquid fuel source. With a liquid fuel source, it's very transportable.
Yeah, it's fungible. It's, they used whiskey as currency back in the day. And there's a great book. It's fiction. It's called The Whiskey Rebellion, but it's based off of it's historical fiction.
Right.
And it is that this. That is a big plot line, is them paying their rent in whiskey and this kind of stuff, So whiskey as a currency and alcohol as a currency was kind of a running theme as I was doing all this research. So when I came across this, I said, I want to do that. I don't have a farm. This is generally something that would appeal to someone who maybe has a farm or has some, but I wanted to do it anyway. And I wanted to figure out, I don't want to work out the bugs, I want to work out the kinks, and I just dove right in. And I ran into two major obstacles. Capital, and so you can get a permit to distill 5,000 gallons for fuel purposes for free. It's a free permit. It's really easy to get, and so I figured, okay, that's a good number. I'll shoot for that. I'm gonna try to do a 5,000 gallon annual, sort of distillation setup. But thinking about it, if I wanted to scale, there's a distribution issue as well. I have to basically. And what David Bloom proposes is community-supported energy, like a community-supported agriculture. Like, you basically pay your subscription at the beginning of the year, and you're allotted a certain amount of gallons throughout the year. And so it would be done as a collective. But, as that, to scale it up, it gets bigger. And so I started kind of, thinking of these different, but what about several, and how could you connect them and build a network and exchange in between them? And I started to think of having a currency that would be backed by this locally produced ethanol, and so in effect, what you would do by subscribing to, at the beginning of the year would be essentially purchasing these credits that would then be exchanged as a local currency.
Okay, so let's say that we have one of these community-supported fuel. Is that what you call it?
Community-supported energy, CSE.
Energy,
yeah.
CSE. Okay, so you subscribe to that. I don't subscribe to that. So you're saying that once you've subscribed to that and you have your set amount of credits for the year, you could sell some of those to me, and I could then be able to redeem them or also use it as a currency myself in the same way that you did.
Right. Well, and the other part of it is, as well as that you're producing fuel, but like I said, after you distill the alcohol, you have this mash left, and that is a huge nutrient source. There are many things that can be done agriculturally from that. You know, grow mushrooms, feed it to fish, grow vegetables, and all these other things. So it works in conjunction with the local farms. So you're producing fuel and you're producing food. And so say you're building this distillation facility, and you need some welding work done. You know, well, the welder, I'm not a welder, but I can find someone who can weld and can be paid in these credits, which can then in turn be redeemed to purchase fuel or vegetables or mushrooms, or, you know.
Right.
I'm a big fan of local economies and local currencies, and, you know, they add far more value to a local economy than national currency would. So this was the idea I was coming up with, and this also in turn raises the capital to build the facility.
Right. It's essentially, you know, it's like a CSA. You're pre-ordering.
Yeah,
sort of.
It's essentially crowdfunding.
Yeah.
It's Kickstarter on a local level
Right.
for, you know, a very specific reason.
Right.
So yeah, that was my bright idea. I'm like, okay, I want to figure this out. I want to design this currency. because this was a problem I ran into. I don't have the funds to do this. It's kind of an obscure business model. I don't know if I could borrow the money for it. But I want to see it done, and I want to see it be done to be replicable and scalable. And so I wanted, you know, I'm big on design. Another aspect to this whole ideology is the concept of permaculture. I don't know if you're familiar with permaculture.
I am a small amount, but why don't we recap just for the audience?
Well, permaculture is a method of designing agricultural landscapes to be permanent, like a forest or something. The way nature designs things, it doesn't design anything with waste. You know, there are no carbon monoxide spitting in the air.
Well, I mean, let's dig into that a little bit. You know, I live in a forest, right? So there are lots of trees in the forest. The trees have leaves. The leaves fall to the ground. Some people would characterize the leaves that fall to the ground as waste because they're no longer being used by the tree. So how does that tie in with permaculture?
Well, the leaves break down into soil, which in turn feeds the plants. I mean, the Amazon forest.
So we're talking about the cycle of things.
The cycle of things,
right.
Yeah, and the stacking of functions. Probably couldn't give you the best examples right now, but there are the concept of things serving multiple purposes.
So it's almost like a systems-based approach to
Yes.
to the growth cycle,
Yes.
as opposed to the monoculture that a lot of
Exactly.
times you see used.
Exactly.
Right. So
Yeah.
instead of there being one type of thing like fields of wheat, instead you have various things that all synergistically interact with each other.
Right. Polyculture, annuals, perennials, all working together. I mean, it's an observational design system. I recommend anyone also to look into permaculture and as an alternative to our current monoculture nightmare. You know, like I said, the fuel, food, and our currency issues were these glaring problems in society, in my opinion. And the monoculture, peak oil, and fiat currency.
So just again, real quick, I don't mean to keep we're covering a lot of concepts here, and I want to make sure that we're keeping people with us. Why is a monoculture bad in agriculture?
Several reasons. One of them, as monoculture, basically opens up to pest problems. There's no, if a potato bug sees a field of potatoes, it's just open season. It's just a smorgasbord. But if it's polyculture and you have several different types of crops, it's not as easy pickings for
I see.
one insect to come
So
in
one
and
type
wipe
of
the whole
insect
thing out.
exactly could
Yeah.
come in and infest the entire thing, as opposed to only being able to affect a smaller portion of
Right,
it.
and you see certain aberrations starting to arise with you've got Monsanto and the Roundup stuff, and occasionally you see some, I don't know if this is entirely true, I should, but you see resistances to certain pesticides.
Well, you see evolutionary traits
Exactly.
evolve over time. Yeah,
Exactly.
It makes sense,
And so that, and as well as a lot of the ammonia-based fertilizers, which are petroleum-based fertilizers.
Mm-hmm.
So if peak oil is an issue, that's an issue. So yeah, the monocultural agriculture process versus a permaculture polycultural process, are
Right.
polar opposites.
Okay, I got you there. Great. We can.
Okay, yeah.
back to the story.
Okay, so but permaculture also incorporates there's a permaculture economic model, which is looking at economics from a local scale, and I like to say stacking functions from a currency perspective. So designing this local currency that would fund the building of the facility as well as add value to the community, serves multiple purposes in my opinion. So, from a permaculture perspective, that's kind of how I was looking at it. So I have a bit of a technical background, and I know software and hardware, but I didn't want to get into this and have to man these servers and deal with basically a centralized system that I would have to babysit and maintain and all these things. So I'm a musician, and I remember coming across Napster for the first time and saying, the music industry is really gonna get hit with this one, and seeing it all unfold and understanding really the power of decentralization, and that you can't shut it down, kind of thing. And so I was looking for a decentralized open source digital currency, or I figured someone had to be. There were several things that I had found already, other software projects, other digital currency concepts, that people were playing around with. But I figured someone had to be working on some kind of open source decentralized version. And so that's what I Googled, and that's how I found Bitcoin. And it was early stages, but because I'd done so much research on local currencies and alternative currencies, it just blew me away, So I kind of lost myself in the Bitcoin thing for a while, because Bitcoin is so huge. And prior to finding Bitcoin, trying to design a currency that would add, give value to us, it was prior to Bitcoin. So when I discovered Bitcoin, then it was all post-Bitcoin. Bitcoin solved all these problems without having to back it with ethanol. It's inherently valuable as it is. So that was just fascinating. It was fascinating, but it didn't solve the problem that I was trying to solve, which was issuing a currency that it would be backed, that would be decentralized and whatnot. So I kind of set that project aside, the whole ethanol thing. I chipped away at it and whatnot, but it wasn't until the conference, the San Jose conference, where I kind of realized that with the colored coins and Ripple and open transactions, I bumped into a fellow traveler there, and the colored coins actually facilitates that more to the extent that I was looking for. It solves the problem that I was looking for. And prior to going to the conference, I didn't really understand Ripple. I wasn't sure what they were trying to accomplish, what was going on. But after I talked to the guys, I realized that's exactly what they're doing, is making a way to issue a currency that would be backed by, I think they call them gateways, but it's essentially a trusted third party. So you've got colored coins, which are a decentralized asset-backed currency that kind of lives on the blockchain. You've got Ripple, which is a more centralized, I think, version, and then you've got open transactions, which is
a federated
version. But you've got these different attempts at solving this problem. So I decided to pick it back up and at least work on the designing of that aspect of it.
Right.
It's a large, complicated project.
Okay, so does that bring us up to the present? That
brings us up to the present.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's next?
Well, that I don't know. To be honest, I'm there's still there are a few things that I was kind of waiting for to come through. David Bloom has his distillation company, and so he has clients that are purchasing distillation facilities from him, possibly proposing some of these ideas to him. There's also this enzyme I'm trying to get a hold of to make it easier and less expensive. It combines the fermentation with the saccharification process. So that's another thing. And also, I'm not a programmer, so when it comes to actually making some of the colored coin stuff work, I kind of just have to wait for it to evolve.
So, you're talking about colored coins. Could this be implemented through an alternative cryptocurrency? Or
like an alternative blockchain?
Yeah, like an alternative blockchain.
Initially I thought about that when I first, that's why I was looking for an open source version, was because I was possibly going to, just use it and design it. I'm not the biggest fan of alternative blockchains, simply because of the hash rate issue.
But so the hash rate, though, is tied to issuance, basically. I mean, it's tied to issuance, it's tied to security, there are a few other things it's tied to. But it seems like what you're talking about is almost like, your proof of work can only be done by a certain type of person with a certain type of asset, property essentially, who is able and has the equipment or at least part of that process to make it. So to a certain extent, it's almost like the issuance doesn't come from the blockchain, it comes from real life and then needs to be translated into the blockchain.
Right.
Okay.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean,
and then there's like a redemption mechanism that you have to develop,
exactly.
where like they can trade on their own, but at some point, at any point, somebody can take one or many of these and redeem them for the actual fuel.
Right. And that's where, you're right in the sense that security is not as paramount because you're dealing with...
It's hard to make it.
It's hard to make it. You're dealing with third parties. It's kind of hard to fraud the system. Because essentially, if you're using colored coins and you've got, it's like if you have a coupon or a credit card.
Right.
Anyone can see your credit card number. If they want to steal from you, they can.
Right.
I mean, you can leave the private key exposed, and or I don't know. I haven't quite figured out exactly how to do it or how to propose it. It's more just. So
you're still definitely thinking this one out.
Yeah, I'm just thinking it out.
Yeah.
Which is why I've stayed really quiet about this because I haven't quite figured it out.
Right. I think it's a really interesting idea. I think that actually sounds pretty actionable too. I mean, that's fairly plausible. We hear about altcoin concepts and different colored coin concepts occasionally.
Yeah, well, and this is definitely it's a bit of a departure from the Bitcoin world, which is very blockchain focused, and or Bitcoin focused.
Well, we've been talking about this global local thing that cryptocurrencies enable. Bitcoin certainly is something, but Bitcoin, but I mean, for the purposes that you're talking about, where the focus is more on local, because it's all about it's about developing and enabling relationships between producers and consumers, and then the ability to trade is really almost secondary to that, because the only relationship is between the producer and the consumer. It just depends on who the consumer winds up being. You trade who that is.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. One of the issues I was trying to solve is possibly expanding this local network. So, this is great if you want to drive around your local city, but what if you want to drive across country?
Sure.
Ideally you could have a network and an iPhone app that would link you up to, local ethanol producers that, would be willing to participate in this network. So I'm still thinking it through.
Fair enough. Well, Nathaniel, that's a really interesting idea. We look forward to hearing how it develops. Are you looking for help at this point? Is there a way people can contact you?
Yeah, openalcohol.org is the website that I've been sitting on for a while. info@openalcohol.org be a way to get a hold of me. And yeah, any ideas, thoughts, help, I'm actually just kind of happy to get this out of my head and out.
I can appreciate that. So are you intending to do this as an open source project?
Absolutely. Open source and open model. Ideally I wanted to kind of take the concept and do it and prove that it could work, at least even the production of the ethanol and run the numbers and do it as an open business model, because, and I implore anyone to get the book and take a look at it.
What was the name again?
Alcohol Can Be a Gas by David Bloom. Because he proposes an open business model that's solid. It's a solid, added.
Well, it's something that's valuable that you're talking about. It's easier to say that about that than it is about it intangible.
Yeah, and it's provides employment and value to local economies and all these things that seem to be a problem.
Sustainability.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, great. Well, thank you for stopping by today, Nathaniel.
Absolutely.
Glad we got a chance to do this.
Yeah.
More than 300,000 users and counting trust blockchain.info. It's a Bitcoin wallet service and a wealth of Bitcoin information, and is completely free to use. With a blockchain.info wallet, you'll get the convenience of a web wallet and the security of a desktop client. Blockchain.info is also a block explorer. You can use it to see Bitcoin transactions in real time, check the balance of any Bitcoin address, and view many handy Bitcoin charts, all for free. See what they have to offer today at blockchain.info.